All right, so are you ready to dive into one of the wildest stories in sports? This one is going to make you question everything you think you know about ambition deception
Huh.
and that fine line between a visionary and, well, con artist.
Yeah, hit me. I mean, the world is just full of these larger than life figures,
Yeah.
making these big promises.
Yeah,
And it's not always easy to figure out what's real and what's a con.
exactly. And that's where John Spano comes in.
Oh, yeah.
This guy, he actually attempted one of the most audacious scams in sports history.
Wow.
Tried to buy the New York Islanders back in the 90s.
Back in the 90s.
We've got articles, court documents, even excerpts from the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, Big Shot, to break down.
Oh, wow. So we've got a lot to unpack.
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot to unpack.
So what's so fascinating about this case is how Spano just built up this whole facade of wealth,
Yeah.
claiming a net worth of over $200 million.
$200 million?
Dropping names like it was nothing.
Yeah.
Boasting about inheriting all this wealth, which wasn't even real, and even exaggerating the size and assets of his company.
His company, what was it called?
The Bison Group.
The Bison Group. Okay, so hold on. So he's claiming to be this Texas millionaire swooping in, saving the day for this struggling franchise.
Right.
But in reality,
He was broke, basically.
wow.
And that's where the psychology of the cons comes in.
Right.
He played on people's desire to believe a good story, especially when it's about someone coming in to save a team like the Islanders.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to root for the underdog, right? But then you have to ask, how did he fool so many people?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the NHL, we're talking about banks, media, even Mario Lemieux.
It's crazy, right? And that's where the NHL's due diligence, or lack thereof, comes in.
Okay.
So get this, they spent less than $1,000 verifying his claims.
You're kidding.
Nope, less than $1,000.
To vet a potential owner for an NHL franchise.
Relying on documents that turned out to be completely forged.
Wow. Were they just so caught up in the excitement of a new owner, or was there something more going on there?
Well, it was the mid-90s, and the Islanders were really struggling financially.
Right.
So there's this theory that the NHL was so desperate to just get rid of the team that they overlooked some pretty obvious red flags.
I mean, desperation can make people do crazy things right.
Absolutely.
And to be fair to the NHL, this whole fiasco did lead to much stricter vetting procedures
Oh, yeah.
for future owners.
Definitely learned their lesson.
So Spano's scam, in a way, forced the league to clean up its act.
Yeah, a painful lesson, but definitely necessary.
Yeah. So remember that $5 million down payment Spano was supposed to make?
Oh, yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He couldn't come up with the money.
Oh, boy.
The cracks started to show.
Uh-oh.
He started getting desperate, trying to keep this whole illusion alive.
Oh, man.
Like, get this, he sent a $1,700 check instead of a $17 million payment,
Are you serious?
blaming it on a decimal point error.
A decimal point error. Seriously.
That's what he said.
But, I mean, did anyone actually buy that?
Some did at first, but the truth always comes out.
It does?
Newsday, they launched this big investigation and exposed Spano's real financial situation.
So the gig was up. What did he do?
Well, he did what any con artist on the run would do.
What's that?
Fled to the Cayman Islands.
Oh, of course he did. But he didn't stay there forever, did he?
No, he eventually came back to face charges and ended up serving time in prison.
Okay.
But remember how we said he wasn't a one-trick pony?
Yeah.
The Islanders scheme, that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, what else did he do?
This guy had a long history of scams.
Wow.
He even conned Mario Lemieux out of over $1 million.
Wait, he scammed Mario Lemieux. How did he do that?
He convinced Lemieux to invest in this business venture and then just pocketed the money.
It's incredible how he gained the trust of someone like Lemieux,
Yeah, Lemieux is known for his integrity and his business smarts.
Right, so we've seen how Spano built this whole elaborate illusion of wealth, how he exploited the NHL's desperation, and how his scheme ultimately fell apart. But I have to ask, did he ever really believe that he could pull this off?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
In the 30 for 30 documentary, Spano actually says that buying the Islanders was a game with myself.
A game with himself.
Yeah.
So maybe he was more interested in the challenge of the con than actually owning the team.
It's possible.
That's kind of unsettling.
It is.
It makes you wonder, was he driven by greed or was it something more complex?
It's tough to say for sure. Could be a combination of both.
Yeah.
But one thing is certain, this whole saga raises some really big questions about how we view success and what people are willing to do to achieve it,
Yeah. What do you think, listener, have you ever encountered anyone who just seemed a little too good to be true?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Yeah, especially in a world where, we're just surrounded by all these images of overnight success and people defying the odds. It's like it's easy to get caught up in it all?
Totally.
Hmm.
So how do we protect ourselves from falling for the next John Spano? I mean, is there any way to actually separate the real visionaries from the con artists?
Well, I think there's some warning signs you can look out for. Like,
Okay.
be wary of anyone who is constantly overselling their achievements or making promises that just sound too good to be true.
Right, like Spano claiming to have graduated from this really fancy prep school,
Right.
when in reality he went to like a small Catholic school.
Yeah. I mean, talk about embellishing your background.
Yeah,
Con artists, they often create these elaborate backstories to make themselves seem more prestigious and, authoritative. They
yeah.
know that a good story can make them seem way more credible and trustworthy.
And don't forget the name dropping.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
Spano loved to just casually mention all these powerful people he supposedly knew,
Right.
as if he were part of some elite inner circle.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to borrow credibility from others.
Exactly. So what's the takeaway here? How can we avoid falling for these scams?
I'd say the most important thing is to trust your gut.
Okay.
If something feels off or if someone's story seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask tough questions
Yeah.
and demand proof.
Don't let the charm and charisma cloud your judgment.
Exactly.
Spano was a master manipulator.
He was.
But, beneath that smooth exterior was just a web of deception.
It's a good reminder that appearances can be deceiving.
Definitely. Now, before we move on, I think Spano really believed he could actually pull this off.
That's a great question, and honestly, it's tough to say for sure.
Yeah.
But in that 30 for 30 documentary, Spano, he makes this really interesting comment. He says that buying the Islanders became a game with myself.
A game with himself, huh?
Yeah.
So maybe he was more interested in the challenge of the con than actually owning the team.
It's possible.
That's a little creepy.
It is.
Makes you wonder, was it greed or was there something more to it?
It's hard to say. Could be a little bit of both. But one thing's for sure, this whole story brings up these important questions about how we see success and the lengths people go to get there.
Yeah, and how easily we can be fooled.
Oh, absolutely. Con artists are really good at playing on people's emotions, their hopes and even their fears.
So we got to be aware of those tactics
Yeah,
and, just maintain a healthy dose of skepticism.
exactly. Even when you're dealing with someone who seems really charming.
Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier
Okay.
about those warning signs.
Right.
Can you elaborate on those a bit more? I mean, are there specific things we should be looking out for?
Definitely. I think one of the biggest red flags is when someone constantly brags about their connections.
Like Spano and all those powerful people he claimed to know?
Exactly. It's a classic tactic to make yourself seem more important than you really are.
Right, so it's not just about what they say, but how they say it.
Exactly. Pay attention to their body language, their tone of voice.
Okay. Any other red flags?
Well, another thing to watch out for is inconsistency in their stories. Okay.
If the details keep changing or don't quite add up, that's a major warning sign.
Makes sense. So basically, we need to be detectives in our own lives.
Exactly.
Mm.
Don't just take things at face value. Do your own research, ask questions, and trust your instincts.
So what about in the business world? I mean, are there specific things investors should be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, due diligence is crucial. You got to thoroughly vet anyone you're considering doing business with.
Right.
Don't let the excitement of a potential deal cloud your judgment.
So it's all about balancing that enthusiasm with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked about the warning signs, but what about the positive side? What are some characteristics of genuine visionaries?
Well, I think one key difference is that they're not just focused on personal gain.
Okay.
They genuinely want to make a positive impact on the world.
So it's about more than just money and power.
Exactly. They have a vision for something bigger than themselves.
And they're willing to put in the hard work to make it happen. Exactly. They're not afraid of challenges and setbacks. In fact, they often embrace them as opportunities for growth.
So it's about resilience and a genuine passion for their work.
Absolutely.
All right, so to wrap up this part of our discussion.
Yeah.
What's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's about being aware of the fact that there are John Spanos out there.
People who are willing to deceive and manipulate to get what they want.
Exactly. So we need to be vigilant and protect ourselves.
And at the same time, we should celebrate the real visionaries.
Yeah,
The people who are truly making a difference in the world.
absolutely.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve deeper into the aftermath of Spano's scheme and explore the lasting impact it had on the NHL.
Okay, so we've been unpacking this wild story of John Spano, right?
Yeah, the guy who almost conned his way into owning the New York Islanders.
Exactly. And we've talked about his tactics, the NHL's lack of due diligence,
Right.
and the impact his scheme had on everyone involved.
Yeah, the human cost of it all. But what I'm really interested in is the legacy of this whole thing.
The legacy.
Yeah, I mean, it goes beyond just one man's ambition and deception.
It does. It really does. On the surface, it seems like a simple case of greed and lies.
Right.
But it also reveals something deeper about us, about our culture.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. We're fascinated by success.
Okay.
And we love a good story.
Yeah.
And Spano's success, even though it was built on lies, it tapped into something we all crave.
What's it?
That rags to riches story,
Okay.
The charismatic outsider who defies the odds.
Right.
He presented himself as this self-made millionaire, the savior of the Islanders.
And people wanted to believe it.
They did. They really did, even when the evidence suggested otherwise.
So you're saying it's not just about Spano's actions.
Right.
But about a larger cultural context.
Exactly. A context that allows these scams to flourish.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
We're bombarded with stories of overnight success all the time. Yeah. Entrepreneurs disrupting industries, making millions out of thin air.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And it creates this environment where we almost expect the impossible.
Which makes us vulnerable to the people who want to exploit that.
Exactly. And it's not just in sports. Think about finance tech, even politics.
Right.
Charisma and a good story can overshadow a lack of substance.
So how do we protect ourselves?
Yeah.
How do we become more discerning? How do we see through the smoke and mirrors?
It comes down to critical thinking.
Okay.
Questioning assumptions, not being swayed just by charm or a good story.
So we need to dig deeper.
We do. We need to demand evidence, challenge the narratives we're given.
It's about remembering that real success takes time.
It does. It takes hard work, struggle, even failure.
And true visionaries aren't just ambitious.
No, they have integrity.
All right.
They play by the rules.
And they care about others.
Exactly. They're not just in it for themselves.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into John Spano's world,
Yeah.
I hope you'll walk away with a healthy dose of skepticism.
A keener eye for spotting those warning signs.
Because the line between a visionary and a con artist can be so thin.
It can be incredibly thin. It's up to us to be informed.
Be critical.
And make sure we're not being taken in by the next big shot who promises us the moon.
So until next time, keep asking those questions and stay curious.